It's the most effective way for social change is humiliate your enemy and make them poor. And that's how social change actually happens.
I, in my stories and novels, often write about counterfeit worlds, semi-real worlds, as well as deranged private worlds, inhabited often by just one person, while meantime the other characters either remain in their own worlds throughout or are somehow drawn into one of the peculiar ones. This theme occurs in the corpus of my 27 years of writing.
Oh. And, you know, well, do you want to hear my answer?
At no time did I have a theoretical or conscious explanation for my preoccupation with these pluriform pseudo-worlds, but now I think I understand. What I was sensing was the manifold of partially actualized realities lying tangent to what evidently is the most actualized one, the one which the majority of us, by consensus gentium, agree on.
That will...
Can we get security up there?
Then in mid-March, a month later, the total body of memories, intact and entire, began to return.
Something really bad is going to happen to you and your friends and your cousins and your bank account and your mistress and whoever was involved. We need to stand up, and those people need to be scared. And safe means that the other person is scared.
You are free to believe me or to disbelieve, but please take my word on it that I am not joking. This is very serious, a matter of importance.
Quote, well, look, he's a sociopath, and they are cruel and sadistic. They get pleasure from the pain of others because it is a way to demonstrate their dominance. It's a way to hit back when they feel they've been wronged, unquote. Tony Schwartz, what better or more apt description for somebody like Alex Karp? Quote, today, we live in a society in which spurious realities are manufactured by the media, by governments, by big corporations, by religious groups, political groups. So I ask in my writing, what is real? Because unceasingly, we are bombarded with pseudo-realities manufactured by very sophisticated people using very sophisticated electronic mechanisms. I do not distrust their motives. I distrust their power. They have a lot of it, and it is an astonishing power, that of creating whole universes, universes of the mind. I ought to know. I do the same thing, unquote, Philip K. Dick. Hello, friends. Welcome back to the channel. Today, we are going to be asking the question, did Philip K. Dick kind of, in a way, predict Alex Karp? Alex Karp, of course, is the co-founder and CEO of Palantir. He is a manic freak who often daydreams about drone striking his business rivals and says that he believes he'll be thrown out of a window if the so-called far right ever comes to power. This is a man who has gone on to CNN to brag about how he single-handedly stopped the rise of the far right in Europe. So he's literally bragging about interfering in other countries' political processes. This is a man who has said things like, our enemies need to go to bed scared. They need to wake up scared. Scared because safe means the other person is scared. Like, this is a deeply unwell individual. This is a man who is seemingly struggling with psychopathy, narcissism, and a hint of schizophrenia. Just like his buddy, Peter Thiel, whose name is literally an anagram of the reptile. Make of that what you will.
discrimination? Yes, I'm against that. By the way, even if I was in favor of it, our products make that nearly as impossible as anyone's ever seen in a product. We created direct alignment with our customers. And what does that mean? It means when our customers have a unique and tribal way of doing something, whether it's underwriting or fighting or making workers even more valuable, we put an FDE, we orchestrated an ontology, we take the tribal understanding of their business, the specific nature of their business that makes them particular and valuable and lethal, and we empower that.
Alex Karp has said in August of 2024 that the US will very likely fight a three-front war against Russia, China, and Iran. All three of them at the same time. This is his vision for World War III, which, by the way, his company, Palantir, would seemingly profit handsomely from. Philip K. Dick, of course, is a science fiction writer and somebody that could be kind of looked at as sort of a modern day prophet. Of course, Philip K. Dick struggled with things like addiction and mental illness, and yet he seems to have predicted a lot of our modern world, from things like artificial intelligence, predictive policing, to virtual reality and deep fakes. But did he also predict the rise of the Karp archetype?
We were under surveillance. We really were. There was no doubt about it whatsoever. I've seen my CIA file. I've seen my FBI file. Under the American Freedom of Information Act, I was legally allowed to see both files. The CIA opened my mail. The FBI had a file on me. I've seen both. It depends a little on what you mean by paranoia. If you mean a psychotic conviction that you were being persecuted, which is not in accord with reality, I don't think I had that. But boy, I sure thought the cops were watching everything I did, and I was correct.
In his novel, Vulcan's Hammer, Philip K. Dick actually wrote about an AI world government, which is pretty fascinating to read about in 2025. I'll just read from the back of the book here. Vulcan 3, the supreme computer. It was autonomous, self-servicing, and sentient. A machine whose cold, dispassionate logic had freed the world from war and poverty. When Vulcan ignores all questions concerning the Healers, a fanatical group dedicated to Vulcan's destruction, Director Buries becomes suspicious. The world government has been infiltrated, but by whom? Buries investigates, but Vulcan has already devised a solution of its own, and the winged terror of Vulcan's hammer is unleashed on the world. And I think about things like, biometrics, facial recognition, drones. I mean, it's kind of crazy that he was writing about this so long ago. So not only did he warn about AI, he apparently believed that he was speaking to an AI voice in his head. In 1976, Philip K. Dick wrote the following about what AI might become. Quote, "Within the universe, there exists fierce, cold things, which I have given the name quote-unquote machines to. Their behavior frightens me, especially when it imitates human behavior so well that I get the uncomfortable sense that these things are trying to pass themselves off as human, but are not. I call them androids, quote-unquote, which is my own way of using that word. By android, quote-unquote, I do not mean a sincere attempt to create in the laboratory a human being, as we saw in the excellent TV film The Questor Tapes. I mean a thing somehow generated to deceive us in a very cruel way, to cause us to think it to be one of ourselves. Made in a laboratory, that aspect is not meaningful to me. The entire universe is one vast laboratory, and out of it come sly and cruel entities that smile as they reach out to shake hands. But their handshake is the grip of death, and their smile has the coldness of the grave." What better description for AI than that? In his exegesis, he mentions hearing an AI voice in his head 115 different times. He writes, "And now I exhaust myself trying to explain March of 1974. I was lithium toxic and had a schizophrenic breakdown. My mind monitors my missile anamnesis as a clue to prior psychosis. I need romance, adventure in my life. The AI voice is a special kind of a hallucination, one of wish fulfillment and need due to loneliness, emotional starvation, and grief and ill use. I just can't endure life without that lovely voice guiding me, so I regress to a level, atavistic in historical terms, at which such a bicameral experience, like in Scanner, can take place. The AI voice is my imaginary playmate, my sister, evolved out of my childhood Bill and Nell fantasies. I did not regress to my own childhood only, but back along the Platonic form axis, i.e., into the collective unconscious, back thousands of years. It was a mercy. I was so unhappy and afraid, like R. Crumb, so behind the 8 ball, so filled with anticipatory dread." Unquote. But in another novel, The Simulacra, he writes about a company that is literally called Karp and Sons that makes presidential androids, quote unquote. And I apologize, but there will be some spoilers to that novel. The character is Felix Karp, and this character is very similar to Alex Karp. It's very strange. It is almost as if Philip K. Dick was kind of seeing into the future, or a potential future, where a Karp-like figure was in place. And the name Karp appears in the Simulacra 119 times. Philip K. Dick's 1964 novel, The Simulacra, depicts a dystopian world where there is a United States of Europe and America. So think about like a technocratic regionalism, a sprawling authoritarian superstate where reality is meticulously engineered through advanced simulation, propaganda, and corporate state fusion. In the novel, the government is essentially a facade. The nominal First Lady, Nicole Thibodeau, is an immortal actress who cycles through body doubles and simulacra, which are like robotics or holographic stand-ins, to maintain the illusion of continuity and charisma. But real power lies with a shadowy council of oligarchs, media conglomerates, and psychic corporations that manipulate public perception via telepathic advertisements, time travel technology for historical revisionism, and a rigid class system enforced by berserkers, which is basically like the Cheka, the Stasi, the secret police. Citizens live in a hyper-mediated bubble, voting in rigged elections, consuming simulated entertainment, and relying on AI-like systems for everything from therapy to governance. And you have to remember, this was like 1964 that he was writing this. And I think the parallels to what we see today in 2025 and the things that we imagine in the future is striking. The plot unravels when a classical musician's band is co-opted into the propaganda machine and thus exposing cracks in the simulation. The setup really kind of creepily prefigures a potential hyper-surveilled, AI-augmented future, in many ways. There is the simulated leadership and deepfake governance. In the novel, the First Lady Nicole is a constructed persona sustained by actors and robots and holographics, allowing the elites to project the appearance of eternal youth and control narratives indefinitely. And it really does parallel with like the track that we're on now, okay, with 2025 advancements in generative AI, things like deep fakes, holographic avatars, like the ones that were demoed at the CES in 2024, leaders could use real-time AI proxies for public appearances. Imagine a president or a CEO whose live speeches are algorithmically generated from vast data troves, which is a great way to cover up things like potential health issues, like, oh, a president with dementia, or scandals, or even death. It's very interesting, is it not? China's 2023 deepfake regulations kind of, are part of this. And we had election interference reports where the FBI was warning about how AI manipulated media could affect the elections. I mean, this shows that simulated figures could actually happen, and that something like that becoming ubiquitous could erode trust in all institutions and lead to a post-truth polity where voters are basically just interfacing with curated illusions. There is the corporate state fusion, which we are seeing now in the data oligarchy. Power in the book, The Simulacra, is held by cartels like the geese. These are the psychic advertisers in media firms that own politicians, using technology to predict and shape behavior. I mean, I ask how this is any different from the world that we are living in, which is a world dominated by data monopolies. Just think about big tech's role in suppressing information during election cycles, literally like removing stories from all social media platforms. Think about big tech's partnerships with government agencies, like the CIA, the FBI, the NSA. I mean, we are in that world now, and it's essentially full spectrum dominance. We have things already like predictive analytics and ubiquitous surveillance. We have drones, the Internet of Things. We are now going to be moving into a future where we have BCIs and neural interfaces like Neuralink. This could eventually get to the point where we have preemptive governance, arresting people for thought crimes via sentiment analysis. And it might sound crazy to think that that could happen, but we're already seeing pre-crime. We are already seeing people being arrested for what amounts to thought crimes, or talking about something with a group of people, that while they're being surveilled and probably talking to federal informants. Philip K. Dick's time travel for advertising targeting. It's just like, you couldn't make it up if you wanted to. It's so funny how that mirrors modern algorithmic feeds, where reality is personalized to each person's device to literal addiction levels, which causes people to be basically compliant with the system. They can literally curate everything that you see, from the news that pops up in your news feed to what posts you see on social media. They can curate your reality. So think about, in a time of like a crisis, right? What if there is some major economic collapse that affects the entire world? Governments could basically outsource to private AI firms, creating a simulacra state where elections are nothing more than theater and policy is optimized by black box models, which is, in a way, kind of what we already have, is it not?
She did appear. She was a total stranger. And she did inform me of this fact, that some of my fictional works were in a literal sense true. I wrote out these dreams in novel after novel, story after story. To name two in which this prior ugly present obtained most clearly, I cite The Man in the High Castle and my 1974 novel about the U.S. as a police state called Flow My Tears, the Policeman Said. I'm going to be very candid with you. I wrote both novels based on fragmentary residual memories of such a horrid slave state world. People claim to remember past lives. I claim to remember a different, very different present life. I know of no one who has ever made this claim before, but I rather suspect that my experience is not unique. What perhaps is unique is the fact that I am willing to talk about it.
The novel's climax involves simulacra glitches that reveal the truth of the situation and end up sparking a rebellion. And this, could happen in the future. I just kind of doubt that people would rebel because of the things like learned helplessness and complacency that we see. But as virtual reality and augmented reality merges with actual reality, think about Meta's Orion glasses or Apple's Vision Pro ecosystems, where they could kind of create this like virtual reality majority where you've got people in VR all day essentially living in tailored simulations detached from physical scarcity. Economic inequality, the top 1% holding 40% or more of all global wealth. That is a fact per Oxfam in 2025 this year. That is insane. Almost the top 1% almost own half of the entire world's wealth. That could enforce this, right? You have these elites in their gated communities and gated realities, and then the masses are in essentially gamified welfare where they're going to tokenize everything and get everybody on the blockchain where all your financial transactions can be surveilled and monitored. You could have the psychic elements in the story kind of foreshadow like the BCIs, the brain computer interfaces manipulating people's emotions. I mean, hell, just think of DARPA's 2020 neurotech. And this could get to a point where, these AI hallucinations show errors or at least cause people to be cognizant of the fact that they're living in essentially a simulated reality. There could be cyber attacks that expose the data hordes and could shatter the illusion, leading to uprisings akin to the 2020 social media fueled protests, but amplified by hacked simulacra. Philip K. Dick's Prescience warns of a future where technology doesn't just augment power, it is power, rendering human agency essentially obsolete unless or until the facade starts to crack.
We are living in a computer-programmed reality, and the only clue we have to it is when some variable is changed and some alteration in our reality occurs. We would have the overwhelming impression that we were reliving the present, déjà vu. Perhaps in precisely the same way, hearing the same words, saying the same words. I submit that these impressions are valid and significant, and I will even say this: such an impression is a clue that at some past time point a variable was changed, reprogrammed as it were, and that because of this an alternative world branched off.
The novel features Dr. Egon Superb as a psychotherapist who's like literally going back in time to try to change Hitler. And there is a key antagonist though, which is Felix Karp, a high-ranking executive in the government's propaganda apparatus. He's not like an absolute ruler in the novel, but he is somebody who is basically a key enabler. He is a brilliant, ruthless technocrat who oversees the simulacra production, media manipulation, and elite security. He is portrayed as a data-obsessed strategist who uses analytics to maintain the First Lady, Nicole, illusion. He's loyal to the system, but pragmatic, and somebody who would eliminate threats. Like in the novel, he orders assassinations. He's a blend of intellectual PhD level expertise and corporate operator, thriving in the fusion of state and private power. And it's so funny to me how much that fictional character from this Philip K. Dick novel, Felix Karp, how much he parallels Alex Karp, the co-founder and CEO of Palantir, which is a real-world data analytics giant specializing in AI-driven surveillance and predictive policing. Palantir's tools, like Gotham and Foundry, essentially hoover up massive data sets, and they put it all together to quote-unquote see the future, tracking insurgents for the US military, or optimizing supply chains, as Karp has said, or forecasting crisis for the governments and for clients like ICE, the NSA, and even the NHS in the UK. Are, allied nations to the United States, essentially. So when we look at the similarities between this fictional character, Felix Karp, from Philip K. Dick's novel, The Simulacra, and we compare it to Alex Karp, the Palantir CEO, it is kind of striking. So Felix in the novel he's like a mid to high level operator, and he is in charge. He's in the Simulacra Council. He's in charge of engineering illusions for the ruling elite. And so compare that to Alex Karp, who leads a company, Palantir, that builds, quote, operating systems for the modern world, as Karp said in a 2023 earnings call. This company, Palantir, has contracts worth of billions of dollars with the Department of Defense, which I guess is now the Department of War, the CIA, and foreign intelligence. Palantir had a $480 million contract with the U.S. Army in 2024. Those contracts are, projected to continue in the future. And Palantir basically enables state surveillance without being the state itself. It essentially works as like a cutout, right?
She believes I'm evil. I believe she's an unwitting product of an evil force, Hamas.
There's the technocratic mindset of both of these characters. The fictional Felix uses technology, the simulacra and psychics, to predict and control behavior. And in the novel, he basically views humans as nothing more than data points. Well, contrast that with Alex Karp. He has a PhD in neoclassical social theory from Goethe University. He calls Palantir's mission saving Western civilization via software that, quote, finds the bad guys, unquote. Right. And who decides who the bad guys are, right? Palantir claims that their tools predict terrorism, migration, and even the COVID spread. It's outrageous. In the novel, Felix sanctions murder to protect the system and has no qualms about lying and deception. And then just look at Alex Karp, who defends controversial clients like predictive policing, which has been criticized as, being basically biased, and how this is manipulative. It goes against everything the United States Constitution supports, which are things like due process and civil rights. Alex left Cambridge Analytica's board over ethics, and yet he profits from very similar technology. I would say Palantir is even worse than Cambridge Analytica. In another example, Karp has defended Palantir's work with the IDF amid the Gaza genocide. Karp has touted this as moral. It's just outrageous. In the novel, the fictional Felix is an elusive, behind-the-scenes character. And in real life, Alex Karp is an eccentric, self-styled philosopher CEO. He dyes his hair, he practices Tai Chi, he quotes Goethe. He doesn't do a lot of interviews, but he has a very cult-like following, although this has changed recently where he is being put out into the public and he's doing more and more interviews. He's getting daily articles written about him. He's being brought on to financial news to talk about, Palantir's heavily overvalued stock. I think it's very interesting that both of the Karps, the fictional Karp of the novel and the real Alex Karp, are basically shadowy architects of essentially like a surveillance state. In the novel, Felix maintains an immortal leader via robotics and AI proxies, and Alex Karp has Palantir's AIP, which integrates large language models for real-time decision-making. In the future, that could scale to simulacra governance, things like AI avatars for public officials, which, by the way, was piloted in Singapore's 2024 Smart Nation initiative. So basically, the Felix Karp of the novel, this fictional character, is kind of like an archetype that Alex Karp has fully realized. The civilian technocrat who weaponizes data for hegemonic control and claims that this is for the public good, but privately is profiting tremendously from this. He is a billionaire. It's concerning that if a future like what is portrayed in Philip K. Dick's novel, The Simulacra, ever arrives, firms like Palantir could be used to mass produce the Nicoles and AI presidents sustained by these technocratic figures in the background, where the CEO is the new counselor, in reality is just another data set to optimize. And Wired has put out an article about him yesterday. Alex Karp goes to war. The son of a Jewish pediatrician and a black artist, Karp grew up dyslexic. He says overcoming that challenge helped shape his drive and his defiance. Like, why are they giving him these puff pieces? Business Insider reported on him. Palantir, the Peter Thiel-backed company that sold big data services to ICE and the NYPD, has a CEO who is a self-described socialist. Palantir also contracted with the NSA, this is from that article, to aggregate, organize, and index data from X-Keyscore, the program that indiscriminately collected data on wide swaths of American internet activity. According to the Wall Street Journal, Palantir is now working to empower large corporations with the same kind of data sets that they created for government agencies. They have already reportedly secured contracts with Credit Suisse, Merck, Fiat, and Airbus. Companies like Merck and Credit Suisse are reportedly using them for logistical analytics and financial analysis. An internal Army memo concluded that Palantir and Anduril's NGC-2 battlefield communication software has a, quote, fundamental security problem and should be considered very high risk. And yet they're giving all these government contracts to them. Palantir immediately came out to deny the U.S. Army's findings, stating, quote, Palantir software, which maintains impact level 5 and 6 authorizations, provides the Army with visibility to rapidly conduct comprehensive security assessments across the NGC2 ecosystem. No vulnerabilities were found in the Palantir platform, unquote. In the fallout from that memo, and of course the recent moves by Michael Burry, Palantir stock fell over 7%. Isn't that interesting? So I hate to say it, but if you don't think they have backdoors in all of their platforms, you are crazy. So we have both of the Karps, the fictional Karp in Philip K. Dick's novel, and the real Alex Karp, believing in things like simulated authority, corporate state collusion, and data-driven control of perception. Both of these Karps are essentially secular high priests of surveillance capitalism. Both operate at the nexus of psychology, technology, and power. Both enable illusion at scale, one with simulacra robots, the other with AI ontologies, as Alex Karp said. On a final humorous note, Felix is Latin for happy and fortunate. Like Felix Karp would be the elite who win by managing the lie. And Karp is Yiddish and German for like carp the fish. So you just kind of think of slippery, bottom-feeding, surviving in murky, swampy waters. How prescient and telling Felix Karp, the happy and fortunate bottom feeder, and Alex Karp, another happy and fortunate slippery bottom feeder. Very interesting indeed. So while he didn't name the character Alex Karp, I just think the similarities are fascinating and interesting. But I'm interested to know what you guys think, and I hope you all have a good day. Whee!
One who visited me, the license plate number was written down by the people next door, and I was told that the house was being watched, and that eventually my house would be hit, my files would be opened, my papers would be taken, and so it came to pass. As I said in the Rolling Stone article on me, when I came home and found my house consisting of nothing but rubble, ruins, chaos, broken windows, smashed doorknobs, blown open files, I said, thank God I'm not crazy.